Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to the program. I'm here with my good friend and longtime mentor, Steve Bannon. And I got to know Steve Bannon in the early days of Bannon's War Room, a show that he still hosts now on Real America's Voice. It's an incredible podcast, but more than that, it was the launch pad for the defense of President Trump during the first impeachment. I remember those days when at any given moment we had half of the cabinet and members of his own government, members of House leadership working to install Mike Pence as the president of the United States. And we had this band of pirates led by Steve Bannon and the brilliant Jason Miller and the ever productive Raheem Kassam. And we would get together and strategize, and we built this army of patriots. And now more than a television host, what Steve Bannon really is the leader of a group called the War Room Posse. And what's interesting about this group of Americans is they range from Wall Street executives to CEOs to people that are, cleaning out dumpsters in the middle of the night. It's every walk of life of American. And what Steve does every day for 4 hours a day is direct these people into action. It's not an audience. It indeed is a posse. They call lawmakers. They show up at rallies. They donate to candidates. They buy books and become the pollinators of key information that the MAGA universe needs to thrive. And it's in the leadership of that group, Steve, that I really want to direct our conversation tonight.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Love the podcast.
And by the way, people I don't think even really fully understand the extent to which in some of our toughest moments in Congress, you were right there. I mean, you weren't just a television host. You and I were having 11, 12 conversations a day. And so were a bunch of my other colleagues who were trying to kind of find their way around fighting this crazy system. But you made this pitch to the War Room Posse to fill the billets at a Republican executive committees.
Right. Precinct strategy, all that.
Right. And
human agency.
The posse is white, but not whiter than your normal Republican club meeting. Right. And it's boomer, but not more boomer than your normal Republican club meeting.
Right.
And so you had people that were a little more diverse, a little younger, working class, and they started showing up at these meetings. And now what has happened is they started seeing who was coming around to run for county commissioner or mayor or state representative, and they've started to run for office.
Yes.
And what I want to use some of our time on today is for that posse member or that American that says, you know what, I've got the ability to go and actually build a campaign. What is the Steve Bannon C-Spot run plan? How does that integrate with my own experiences? Because here's what I've noticed. While they have the vigor and the drive that you've instilled in them, there is a tactical feature to running for office that sometimes evades even your most loyal posse members.
Oh, yeah. Remember, most of these people have never really been engaged in politics, and definitely not elective politics. So the first thing is just to convince them that the way through here is human agency. And that really started because we went through phases of the show. It was the War Room impeachment, of which you were essential in. Then we had pandemic in the run-up to 2020. Then the fight to stop the big steal. And then kind of what the nuclear winter of January, February, March, April of 2021, when it looked like the world had abandoned President Trump. Even half the MAGA movement was so crestfallen. How could Trump have won and won so big and 74 million votes and been destroyed? That's when we really started revving up the precinct strategy. And the first thing was just show up. If you show up in most of these precincts, there's going to be empty billets. And so you can get voted in. Now the establishment, whether it's in Central Florida or Central Arizona or North Carolina, are going to have a huge fight, right? But the first thing you got to do is get your chops at the precinct strategy by because the Republican Party structure is actually a grassroots structure. It's actually, it's got, I think, 250,000 open seats or seats that you can go all over the country to do. And our first thing is just get off the couch, go get engaged. And people, by the way, love it. Now, a couple of years into this process, the resistance is so strong, like in Texas. We control the state parties of Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Nevada, Oregon, Nebraska, Colorado, but we really don't. It's this big fight between the grassroots and the business interests. So I tell people, go get engaged, work up the thing, get to the state level, go to the state convention. And then if you want to, it's county supervisor. We had so many people go to county supervisors.
School board?
School board is huge. School boards came in that really came in for the moms of America, moms of liberty. I started noticing the school board, these
God,
schools.
that's a terrible job. My dad was on the school board.
Screaming and yelling at him every day.
There is a special place in heaven for anyone willing to be on. Like
terrible.
when people would come to say, I'm running for the school board,
yes.
part of me would think, why? But it was that
And even
drive.
that's less controversial as today with the libraries and what they're teaching the kids. So that was a huge one. And of course, these have gone back and forth. Already the first wave of the Maha mother or the mother's engaged, we've won school boards and had them flip back as the liberals have gotten engaged. So it's constant war. Here's what we know, is that for the hoplites, for the Grundoons, for the Warren Posse, it is a great training ground. And what it does is also expands, our audience, is a little older, right? But no older than the Republican Party. But here's the thing, you talk to people and their lives get narrower and narrower as they go on. Once they join one of these things, it opens up, they meet new friends, they get new relationships, there's a new sense of purpose. And so, by and large, people are very happy about it. Now, it is an absolute grind, and that's why, like today, we had Steve Stern on. Mm-hmm. They had like 200 guests. Half the show was Tina Peters, who's in prison out in Colorado. The other half was about election integrity, a bunch of things come up in primaries that you got to get on top of. We had.
But when people make that decision to run, like what's the Steve Bannon checklist that you say, write down, do these things to prepare yourself for candidacy, not just within that structure?
First I say, hey, everything that you've ever done, they're going to throw up against you. So you got to have courage just to work through that.
I honestly think that we're so much more resilient to that these
100%.
days. Maybe just I am.
Yeah,
but I think as a society, Facebook and the fact that a lot of people have had every stupid Halloween costume posted on Facebook. We don't have the pearl clutching of the boomers.
But you see the fights. Trump came down 10 years ago this June, right? 10 years ago. If you look at, and I keep saying this 10 years is the preamble to what is in front of us in the Trump movement, right? Over these, particularly next 100 days, couple hundred days.
Trump's a moderate in our movement.
Oh, very much a moderate. He's not close because he's got a good heart. He tries to accommodate people.
He's a deal maker.
He's a deal maker, and he comes from the hospitality industry. Principally, that's where his roots were. That's what he understands: media and hospitality, mass communications.
You totally know that when you're around him and you see the way Trump is so attentive to everyone's comfort.
Yes.
So attentive, laser focused. It's why he doesn't like people to even consume alcohol around him, because he wants you at your sharpest so that when he engages with you, that it's going to be mutually productive and beneficial and joyful.
What I tell people is know yourself, prepare for combat. You'll obviously learn the issues. You will win if you don't quit. That's the key thing. You will win if you don't quit. And we've got
Wait. No. I know a lot of people who run every single time for sheriff and
no. I'm not saying about that. I'm saying the precinct area, which is our entry level.
Right.
And once you get to that, and I actually recommend that.
But these people who become the precinct people, they're not just moving up in the Republican Party.
They're going to town councils. Yes. As soon as they get
they're paying attention.
Yes.
And they're like, look, I just saw this just total
county supervisor
limp rag get rolled in for state representative. I don't want to vote for that person. I have better ideas than they do, and they're running. And I think a lot of them would say to me, could I just get 10 minutes with Steve Bannon? And I want to give everyone that right now. When you say, all right, know yourself, know they're going to throw everything at you. What do you tell people about how to resource a campaign? Because it's an uncomfortable discussion.
Well, first off, you're not going to probably have a big donor. I say just go out small, put your things out.
Some do. You got posse members who are self-funders.
Oh, yeah, no. You do. But I'm saying the average person.
You know what? That's the first question I ask. The first question I ask anyone, it's deeply crass. How much of your own money are you going to put into your campaign?
Well, I do that at a certain level, like for Congress or state level, state house. But I'm saying for the entry, for the precinct and above.
State Senate race in Florida costs
big.
$5 million.
Yeah. A guy's running and wants to run for Congress in Connecticut. Just came 2 days ago. First question I asked him, stop. I said, how big a check are you prepared to write to get off, and he gave me a number. I said, I don't think that's going to be enough. I think you're going to have to think this through and see if it's
we
really
have to
worth
build
it.
a finance strategy,
Yes.
and it's not one size fits all. But what I tried to do was open up every vector. There might have been 4 or 5 big donors that cared about who the state representative was in Destin. So man, if you could get 1 or 2 of them, fill out that vector. Even if it's small at the beginning, get you a small dollar donor base. People that I call it the Christmas card list.
Yeah.
And get that working.
That's
now,
actually the smart. I think that's the smart because it also breaks the ice, which is the hardest of people actually asking for money to actually do this, right? People need that self-confidence. And I think doing that small donor is where they start to break the ice of actually asking their friends. It's like an angel round, friends and family round in venture capital, right? You got to make the ask.
You know what every
and it'll
congressman
power
thinks?
you.
Every single time a member of Congress meets a new person, the first thing that comes to their mind is, can this person become a donor to my campaign, and what is the maximum amount of money I can extract out of them?
But that's the way the system's done it, though, because it takes so much money. You're extraordinary. I think you're the only person in the House that
Or
didn't take,
Senate on the Republican
that
side.
didn't take any PAC money
Or lobbyist money.
or lobbyist money. And how tough was that to what lessons did you learn in that?
I never, ever felt the pinch of it. I felt relieved. I remember when I made the announcement and then just saying to myself, win or lose, I never have to go to one of these 8 a.m. breakfast fundraisers where the Southeast Regional Pipe Distributor is wearing a name tag and giving me $500 and asking me to sign on to some stupid
When you
amendment.
got to the House to get to your committees, didn't they give you a number? Like
Yeah.
you were on armed services,
Yes.
right? That's the
$75,000.
75,000 for the committee,
And they
right?
gave me 10 days to turn it in.
10 days.
Which is, and my
And you had
assumption-
never raised for PAC. You never gone to those folks before.
No, but what I knew was more people might be willing to come up with the 75 Gs than there were slots, so I paid double. I got a check for 150 and brought it, and that's how I got on the Judiciary Committee. They looked at me and said, "Boy, you're a real comer."
I'll bet you still 95% of the audience doesn't understand that. That once you get up here, regardless if you've been Matt Gaetz and saying, I don't want corporate money, I don't want lobbyist money, once you get into the system demands that you pay something just for staying
Well,
around.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be on the agriculture committee or some committee that's not even tied to your, it's tied to your district.
Well, what you have to pay to get on a committee is directly tied to what the algorithm says you can extract from the lobby corps that services that committee.
Right.
And the people who traditionally pick who goes on the committee are the people who lobby that committee. At freshman orientation, when I said I'm real interested in armed services, they said go sit at table 11, and it was like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, L3, and they're sitting there and they're sizing you up, saying if we give this guy the money
weighing in and
to
measuring
get on
you.
the committee, is he going to play ball? Is this somebody we're going to be able to?
And
work
you
with?
said that because your district is Pensacola. It's one of the most significant naval bases in the world.
Home
I think
of the Blue Angels.
there's Air Force assets down there, but the way they judge it is how much money. And they thought you were a comer very early on, correct?
But do you think that, like, for new candidates, getting back to that, do you think that you have to impose some realism there? Because what I've seen some posse members who they say, you know what, I have $50,000 that I can put into this race, and I have some friends who might be able to raise me another $50,000, so I'm going to go run for Congress. When the reality is, that is just not table stakes. And you may have the ability to do the job, but you can only do the job that you will get elected to do.
Yes.
Whereas if you took that 100,000
and put it in a state delegate or a town
got
or
elected to City Hall.
City Hall, yeah.
And then build a
That is
coalition.
that's our recommendation.
Yeah. So how do you have that conversation with people? What are the benchmarks you set?
Well, first off, we have a big screening element, so we have people that do this. But when they come, it's how realistic this is going to be. Several $1 million to get a House seat. Are you known in the community? Do you have a track record? What's your message? How good are you at actually selling yourselves? Do you have a reel? Have you ever done really tough interviews? Have you been out there in the hustings? Do you understand this is every day of your life? You're going to have to be
So
to
you're
the
looking
primary.
for drive and commitment.
Driving commitment and realistic, because so many. But I think it's not as bad today as it used to be. The worst I saw it was around the Tea Party effort in 2010 with a big. And that time around there when the Tea Party first started, you had people coming in wanting to run for Senate, wanting to run for governor, particularly Congress. I don't think you got those, because I think one of the things is media. People watch the shows. They're more attuned to what's going on. They see what a grind it is. It's not as bad as back then. Back then, you had people showing up. Hey, I've got $15,000, which is a lot of money for somebody. I want to run for the House. I can upset this guy in a D+ Ford district, etc.
But you have a responsibility with this posse to direct them
100%.
to the winning
Well,
places.
to make sure that they make their own decision and think this thing through, right? That they're just not running out there.
Here's the other thing that I think the consultant class gets totally wrong. They all talk about building your bio as a candidate. Like, have you been the president of the Rotary Club? Were you on the Little League board?
Yeah.
I don't think bio matters nearly what it used to be, and it might not matter at all.
I think even Trump, yes, I agree that's why governors, in the old days, particularly like in the Democratic Party, run things. I think it's a new thing with media. But you've got to know what the issues are and how you play into these different interest groups. Are you known in those groups? Are you a leader in those groups? Are you showing up at like school boards that people know who you are? So more importantly than having the checkbox of I've done Little League, I've done the PTA, all that, what have you actually accomplished and that people know you? And can you break through the kind of the white noise of media? Do you have a personality? Is that because people want to see authenticity? They want to see fighting spirit. They want to see stick-to-itiveness. They don't want to vote for phonies anymore. That's much more important, I think.
When I first ran in 2010, you would have never thought to ask somebody, how many Facebook followers or Twitter followers do you have? Email was just starting to be a function of real political force after Obama. Does that stuff matter?
I think so. I think it's to get a social media presence, to be interconnected people, to know how to be a force multiplier. One of the things we do is teach people at these academies how to be force multipliers and push out content, push out your own content, build your brand. I think it's absolutely vitally important. In fact, I remember when I took over the Trump campaign or came in as CEO, we're in a dead sprint to get this thing finished. And Florida, we had to get some gap in Florida and stop spending so much time down there because we're trying to pierce the blue wall. So Ohio and Florida, my two, I said with polling, we got to see if we've got a gap going here. And every time we would go somewhere towards even close to the western part of the state, you would show up on the tarmac, and Kayleigh McEnany would show up on the tarmac at the rallies. I said, this guy is dedicated. So I think that paid off well for you.
I miss the rallies. It was like a family reunion. It was an emotional experience.
Yes.
There was so much joy. I think all of these left-wing haters should have to go to a Trump rally because what they will find is
transformative.
They'll feel better about themselves. They'll be happier.
Yes.
And
they talk about the anger in the media and everything like that. There's no anger. This is working class joy for a guy up there that's stepping up and trying to put him in the room.
Can JD put it together this way?
Well, Trump's running in 28, so we're going to have another run. We're going to have another shot at. The rallies. They
were different in 2016, 2020, and 2024.
Oh, yeah,
they all had a different flavor.
Different flavor in 20 and 2024. In 24, actually, I think they were not just bigger, but they were also a little more intense because people realized the stakes.
They were way more diverse.
Yeah, big time. And that's what I'm saying. Even the War and Posse, we're getting more of a black audience, a lot of Hispanics, particularly in South Texas.
Well, I think it's just that it's gendered. I have a theory that we've broken down our politics over race for most of your and my life. And now something very different happened where a bunch of working class black and Hispanic men showed up and said, whoa. Yeah. You're telling me the third grade teacher gets to decide the gender of my kid?
Yeah, not going to happen.
Right. You're telling me that a bunch of my friends and people I grew up have to go fight in some war in Ukraine or the Middle East, and it was the machismo of Trump. Yeah. It was the policy wins. Also
the hectoring of the credential class, and particularly the female credential class of the left, the MSNBC crew hectoring these guys every day.
And I took a lot of crap when I went to television and said, we're going to lose some Karens, but for every Karen we lose, we're going to find a Jamal or a Julio. And that actually is
I
what
noticed
happened.
that. The only thing I put out of Danbury Prison was on the 26th, I think, of September. I said, victory's at hand. My teaching up there at Danbury and living in one of the cell blocks, it was obvious. Black and Hispanic men hate the Democratic Party. And are not going to vote for Kamala Harris. It's just not going to happen. So I'm not saying they're going to vote for Trump, although some were leaning that way and coming that way.
They're not going to vote for Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg.
No, not going to happen. I think if we deliver for that crowd, we've got them. If we can deliver for black and Hispanic men.
What Democrat candidate do you think could assemble that coalition back for the Democrats that you're most afraid of?
Of working class? They have no.
I've got one that I'm afraid of.
Robert Reich said the other day, there's no economic populism. I'm not afraid of it.
Stephen A. Smith scare you?
I'm the one that's been promoting his candidacy, and I went on his podcast, and he's going to come on mine. I think he is somebody they need in that Democratic primary. He's a 5-tool player. And I think he's very serious about considering this. And Stephen, I think...
Well, they don't have anybody in elected office now that could assemble the coalition that they need to win.
But they do have these governors. So you got two brackets. You got the governor's bracket of Westmore, Brashear, Shapiro, Whitmer, that, okay? And then you have what I call right now the celebrity and all other. That's Rahm Emanuel, Pete Buttigieg. It's going to be Polis, right, because he's going to run as
give me that vector.
Bracket, Newsom. You're going to have Stephen A. Smith, I think. Like I said, Mark Cuban. You're going to have a couple other people. AOC, I'm sure, will jump in
Definitely.
there. No doubt. She's got no downside to do it.
Does Bernie run again?
Bernie is dying to run. The problem is he's 83. And I followed very closely all the populist rallies. This is why Reich wrote the piece.
Right.
There's no economic part of it. If you go in and look at these rallies, and by the way, the people over there hunger. They're drawing massive crowds. At 1 o'clock on a beautiful Saturday, you're drawing 35,000 people in downtown L.A. People are on the left are thirsting for.
Well, they're leaderless. They're totally leaderless,
and they don't stick the landing. They don't never talk about economic populism. They're talking about Green New Deal and it's all the the.
They're
crap.
against all the oligarchies except the ones in Ukraine they're willing to fund.
Oh, and the ones they created, the Silicon Valley apartheid state oligarchs. All those 5 big oligarchs are all progressive Democrats, right? I understand now they're hanging out in Mar-a-Lago and they're seeing the light, but they were created by Obama. And the progressive movement and the Biden regime. And remember, they had Lena Khan and never unleashed her. She tightened up the FTC lawsuit against Facebook that Zuckerberg went into the Oval Office 5 times and begged President Trump not to pull the trigger on. Andrew Ferguson's got him in court right now. So no, we are the anti-oligarch party. You see that in federal court. We got the neo-Brandeisians in the Justice Department, biggest antitrust under Gail Slater. You got Andrew Ferguson, FTC. You got the FCC. Jim Jordan tried to break. Facebook got to him, and they tried to get rid of the FTC 2 weeks ago in the one agency. Mike Davis came on. We got the Article 3 and the Warren Posse bombarded these guys. Said, what these guys calling about? 24 hours later,
that was lonely for me on the Judiciary Committee defending Lena Khan and the FTC because I love Jim Jordan, but he was never on the same page.
Oh, he's Facebook. I mean, he's a big tech guy. He's been one of the torturers of Mike Davis in this crowd. So
the torture goes both ways with Mike Davis.
Yeah, Mike Davis.
You mentioned Danbury Prison.
Yeah.
I did everything I could to see that you didn't go to prison. I thought that was a terrible injustice.
And Matt actually tried to come and see me. I just said, hey, you should have seen when Matt Gaetz...
that wasn't very pleasant.
No.
I was threatening the head of the Bureau of Prisons that they better let me go see you. And then they were saying that you were refusing to see us.
Yeah.
And then I was saying to the head of the Bureau of Prisons, we outrank Steve Bannon.
Exactly. But
apparently we didn't.
You put shock through the whole system.
Well,
that's okay.
I always envisioned you in prison taking like 20 minutes to be some sort of mafioso style cell block leader. That like people would be bringing you tribute and like wanting to learn from you.
Yeah, you don't do that because there are real guys that do that. What you have to do, and this is my thing to George Santos, you got to stop whining. You just got to walk in there. You have to know yourself, and you have to be totally, completely focused every second of the day because these places are incredibly violent. My cell block was 84 guys. 84 men, a part of them are child, sex offenders. A part of them are inmates like myself, and part are convicts, right? People that have either been in medium security and worked in really hardened people. And you just got to be focused all day long. And the reason you got to be focused,
focused on what? Your safety?
Focus on just the present. What is actually going on? What are you doing? What's the next evolution? What are you doing that day? What are you doing for exercise? What are you going to do? And just a situation awareness wherever you move in a prison because things are changing. Here's why.
By the way, that sounds like a good idea outside of prison as well.
It is, but it's tough to keep that focus. I can tell you, I was not as focused. When I was in, I was focused and I lost 30 pounds. I haven't eaten meat, red meat. The first steak I had was 2 nights ago from the first day I showed up in Danbury because the food's like animal slop.
I'm so excited when we get our Merryweather Farm shipments in. You get a beautiful piece of ribeye. Look at that marbling. Now, I take it out of the package. Let it get down to room temperature. All I've got on here is a little salt, a little pepper, and then a little avocado oil. And then I've had my pan preheating with a little oil.
Head to merryweatherfarms.com and enter promo code MattG for 15% off your first order.
But you have to. The reason it's so dangerous is the feds have federalized these drug crimes under RICO charges. So it's all these conspiracies to sell drugs. These kids are 25 years old, Hispanic and black principally. They are in prison for 15, 20, and 25 years in a small place like Danbury. So in Danbury, which is 100 years old, has 800, accommodation for 800. I think we had 1,200 at one time there because of so many foreign nationals and child molesters. It's so overcrowded. These young men get there. They have 20 years of their life are going to be spent in the confines of Danbury prison. That's hard. It was hard for me for 4 months. For 25 years, when you're 25 years old, it can break a person. And what they do is they start doing this drug K2. The K2 can get into the prisons, and once that happens, they're violent, uncontrollable, and that can happen at any time.
How do they take K2?
They get K2. I think they smoke it. It comes in on paper. It's the one it can come in on paper, on legal documents, on books. People send them books, and they got it on there. In prison, you can get anything you want. They get phones. They get drugs in there.
Are the guards the ones getting into them?
I would say that a third comes in from drones, right?
Which is crazy to think about.
It's unbelievable. We had a drone. They had a drone thing come in on the beginning of Labor Day weekend that dropped phones and drugs down in the yard. They locked the yard down, then they locked us all down for Labor Day weekend.
If we would have known this, we could have coordinated a posse drone attack on Danbury Prison, like dropping the Constitution.
Yeah. The problem is you get locked up. I mean, they have a thing for that. But no, this is why I've tried to get involved with Jared and Peter on prison reform. The article, the First Step Act was absolutely brilliant of what Jared and you these guys worked on to get through. It was not been implemented. So your
wing of the kind of Breitbart side of the party was very critical of us as we were doing.
I was critical until the end. I came on board towards the end when I saw the politics of it, and it came to me about what the politics are, dealing with friends of mine like Jeff Quatnitz. It is politically the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. It is a way to really because the federal prison system is set up to break families. And these people, I'm telling you, the black and Hispanic men in those prisons don't support the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party has screwed them over.
The Tom Cotton counter argument would be, you can't let these people out into our communities. They become even more expensive wards of the state, one way or the other. They're better behind bars.
No, I think the rescission rates on guys coming out of First Step is lower. I think it's fantastic, right, and this has got to be implemented.
But First Step is not the final step.
No.
Like the argument for prison reform ultimately has to be a data-driven argument about reducing the number of victims because eventually everybody gets out.
Yes.
Very few people don't ever get out.
Yes.
And by the way,
the other thing it has to be is the sex offenders. You got to figure out that they have the sex offenders are in there. Also,
we did mandatory minimums for 50 years in Florida. 15,
20, 25 years, and they're sitting in these prisons. They've never had a traffic ticket except what they do, which is obviously, I think, a disease. It's not a medical facility. It's a prison. And in that prison, like I said, you have inmates and then you have convicts. So you do have predators in there. This is why for Santos, my first recommended him, he's like going on TV and crying on these things. Dude, you just got to man up. Whatever it was, you got found guilty. You got sentenced for this. You're going to go. You should assume President Trump's not going to pardon your commute to sentence. You got to toughen up because this is a very dangerous place. You don't want to look like you're going in there and you're open to these type of emotional swings. You got to be very hardened. So, but what you guys did on First Step it's quite frankly brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And now we're trying to implement it more.
People don't know this, but it's actually one of the reasons I'm most disappointed that I didn't get the chance to be Attorney General, because I have a real passion for prison reform. I chaired the Criminal Justice Committee in my state legislature and did everything I could to see that time was used effectively. It was like, to me, it's like a crime against humanity that you would have that much humanity and not find as much useful purpose for it as possible, even for the folks that aren't ever getting out. And we have so much to do on that front, and I hope
it took us by the way, it took to Jared and Peter Navarro, just to find the Bureau of Prison, I mean, it was so tough to find people, even they're qualified. We finally got, I think, Will Marshall from West Virginia, Rick Stover, who was the warden at Danbury, but left a couple of days before I left. But when I would ask people who you thought, they said, this guy was fantastic. He's now, I think, the deputy. We got a guy named Josh Smith, who's a former felon, who's now a programming guy. So we're starting to do that, and it started to begin the process.
So you know all these guys. You talked to them?
I interviewed all these guys, Stover and all these guys.
So in a way, you ultimately did become the prison ward boss, because now, now instead of you being a guest of the state, you're the one talking to all of them. Like
it's really Navarro and Jared. I got to tell you, the impression that happened from his dad, right, and what his dad
ambassador to France.
Yeah, ambassador to France. What his dad went through, really, and I got to tell you, you guys were onto something way before. Well, first of all, the Republican Party or conservatives, at first I dismissed the thing, what are we doing this for? Later on, towards the end, we jumped in the back of it to help push it over, which you guys done so much work. But it's absolutely, first off, it's the right thing to do. Number two, it's great politics. Now, what you're going to find out, Navarro's working on this right now, it has barely been implemented.
Oh, yeah.
It's barely been implemented. At first, I thought it was because it was Trump. Part of it's that. But the other part is just the system was working on
It's never really had the talent at the Bureau of Prisons.
Exactly.
That's what I wanted to pour into. Really, really getting people excited about those jobs.
They're tough to fill.
They are tough jobs to fill.
You know why they're tough to fill? The reformers say the system's so ossified. Right, you got unions, you got
Well, the smartest people work at the private prisons, so you have to convince people to come out of the private sector and to come and do this. It's where we can do the best.
We got to work on some prison reform here. There's a lot to do, and a lot to do. I know President Trump is very serious about this, so I think it ought to be a major thing. And politically, it's so smart. These people feel the Democratic Party has abandoned them, which it has. It's abandoned the working class. African Americans and Hispanics. That's our greatest opportunity here for this realignment.
Look, we've all seen how unpredictable things can get, whether it's supply chain issues, unexpected emergencies, or just trying to get a doctor to prescribe what you already know you need. It's become way harder than it should be. That's why I trust All Family Pharmacy. They're not just another online pharmacy, they're changing the game. They put you first, giving you the freedom to order what you need when you need it, so you're never left without essential medications. They've got everything: ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, emergency kits, travel kits, and a whole lot more. Over 200 medications are ready to ship, and yes, you can order in bulk to be prepared. Their process is super simple. Just fill out a quick online form, and one of the licensed doctors provides you the prescription, and the meds are shipped right to your door. No insurance required, no hassle, no more waiting around or being unreasonably limited in your options. This is what real medical freedom looks like. You're in control, just like it should be. Stock up today and make sure you've got the meds you need on hand. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt and use code MATT10 for 10% off your next order. Trust me, these guys are doing it right. I want to talk a little bit about what we're observing in the Congress and how they're kind of going about their business. And like you've always taught me and the Bannonites, you find territory, you seize territory, you occupy it.
Try to seize institutions.
Yeah, you utilize it for the benefit of your people.
But one of the problems we have, let me be blunt, because you're too self-effacing. And I love the fact you call me your mentor, but I'm not. You are an extraordinary.
I mean, you and I have probably spent on the phone like
we've been in some
100 hours.
We've been in tough fights.
That's a lot of time.
We've been in some tough fights. Look, you know this. After you get elected, the purpose is to get reelected, right? To get reelected. There's not a lot of profiles in courage up here. There's not a lot of people who want to seize those grounds. There's a handful.
There's like 24.
Yeah,
maybe.
And right now, you had the hard eight under you that changed history with the speaker. But even guys like today, like the Eli Cranes in this, they're looking for leadership. And some of our greatest people are punching out. Andy Biggs wants to go back and run for governor. Everybody there, Byron Donalds, everybody's looking at.
Even your sentence ended.
Yeah, exactly.
All sentences have to end.
Well, that's why it's not looked at. The people that are the best and the fighters and want to seize territory and make some changes are not the ones that are looking at leadership and go up a leadership path.
I don't see Congress as a savable institution in that regard.
What do you mean though? Because you did. Think about it. You changed this institution more on the Republican side than even Newt Gingrich did not change it as much as you changed it.
I believe that we gave hope to those who are fighting. I don't believe that we took the power away from the lobbyists and the special interests that we had hoped. And until you do that, it's failure.
Can you do that in the system we have with the money?
I don't really think so. I am increasingly of the view that it takes the Donald Trump, will and drive. It takes the Elon Musk intelligence.
Yes.
It takes the talented people coming into the agencies. But I have given up my own fever dream that like one day there's going to be a congressional oversight committee doing programmatic review of the budget. That made so much sense to me. When I went on the road, the people want it, even though it sounds wonky. I believe,
they love it.
I believe when you talked about it,
single
you said,
subject
yeah,
bills.
Well, I just think they would actually save the republic, and no one really gets excited about it. And I understand. I think President Trump is really informed by what happened to him on healthcare last time. He tried single subject.
You mean the first
yes.
thing? Yes, we got.
Yeah, and because of that,
by some of our own allies, the House Freedom Caucus. Remember, we made a strategic mistake in allowing Paul Ryan to sit there as we triage what we're going to do
what
about
did he know about anything.
Well, he convinces at the time, he was Speaker, that let us go. We've passed 40 anti-Obamacare bills. We're ready to go. We'll have this done. And then we realized very quickly that the reason they had done it was all performative.
Right.
That the Republicans had no set. This was your freshman. You had just gotten there. Mm-hmm. You saw the chaos. And even it turned out our biggest allies in the long run, the House Freedom Caucus guys, were the guys that fought us the hardest coming out of the box. And remember, they actually passed something. And President Trump said that's a mean bill. I don't know if I want to pass a mean bill. So it was chaotic because the Republican Party wasn't used to governing, right? Mm-hmm. It was all performative, and so that is what got. Now finally, we got his tax program done in the fall of that year, right?
But then that was kind of it.
That was it? That was
right,
the legislation? The infrastructure never got done?
Don't you think that that's shaping how he's thinking about the big, beautiful bill as a strategic vessel? That you better just put all your capital into one thing? I think that's what Trump's thinking. My concern is that becomes a lobbyist smorgasbord.
Well, you see it right now. I mean, look at this. Look, let's go back to what you fought for. And I said this on the show today, but I think it's worth repeating. You actually negotiated hard in January of 2023, and you presented a framework that Kevin McCarthy, if he had executed on the deal that he agreed with, right, could have been one of the greatest speakers in the history of the country, right? But as soon as it passed, all they were trying to do is get out of the one thing they didn't want to do. And this shows you how powerful it is. Single subject appropriations bills. Right? They didn't want it. They fought that time and again. You finally, I think, in the summer of 2023, got it. And if you want to talk about USAID and all this, all those fights were in the summer of 2023. Our audience, we were having 10, 15, 20,000 people a night stay up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Remember on the House floor, you were Republicans arguing against each other. The Democrats kind of off to the side. You'd had the fighters, the Eli Cranes, the MTGs, talking about USAID. We got to cut this. And Republicans, the rhinos, you could really expose them, saying this had to go and pass in the committee, starting passing these bills, and on the floor override our amendments, all the amendments. And so there you saw it, where change could really come from. The apparatus itself didn't want change. That's what I think has happened. I believe President Trump, I think a little bit he may be getting tapped along by Johnson and leadership that are not filling him on the details of what's in this.
You don't think that Trump is actually farming out the thought process of this to Johnson? I mean, Mike Johnson.
Not the thought process, but my point is, it's so complicated. Look what he's got the world on his shoulders. He's trying to stop the kinetic part of the Third World War. We're in a bloodier conflict than World War II right now in the first couple of years. In the arc of instability from Ukraine all the way down through Kashmir and Afghanistan, you've had 1.5 million casualties, right? We've had 2 explosive conflicts, one in Ukraine and one in Gaza. And we've had 2 U.S. Navy battle groups, and coming from a Navy guy that was in a battle group 50 years ago in the North Arabian Sea, we've kind of had them fought to a standstill. I mean, we've taken it to the Houthis, but we've lost a couple of fighter aircraft. We've taken some incoming on destroyers. So my point is, this is volatile.
By the way, the neocons, and this is sinister and dark to have to say, I think they wish we were already drawn into some war with Iran as a consequence of American casualties. They would think that if we lost a ship full of sailors, that would be their patriotic duty to give their life in that manner. And to die at sea, by the way, people don't in order to get us into some righteous war with Iran.
We risk that. That's the problem with being up there. And
it could be tomorrow.
So keeping the Suez Canal, and people ought to understand that doesn't bode well for the Straits of Taiwan and the South China Sea when the flag goes up.
But wasn't that
with
the
Chinese.
best part of the Houthi group chat scandal? I mean, the best part of that was seeing J.D. Vance, who I do believe is the caretaker of our movement going forward, like really articulating what we're saying about that being Europe's interests and us not having to be the military largesse of that very crowded real estate.
I agree. What I didn't like about the group chat, it was obvious President Trump is directly talking to CENTCOM. I mean, this is kind of a sidebar conversation of all of our leaders. Pete, JD, Tulsi, you've got hitters. I would like to have that in the Situation Room around the president, getting that guidance. He's clearly talking to combatant commander, get ready to light things up. So I think that this situation right now, and so when you talk about Trump knowing the details of what's happening in the big, beautiful bill, I think he's basically signed off on the fact, not two bills, one bill, because you're telling me if we do two, I get the smaller one for the border and for the military, I may not get the taxes.
But see, that's the false choice. You and I would do 12. We'd say, you know what?
Exactly.
We are going to force feed them our immigration agenda.
Yes.
And we're going to have all
and they're
our
going to have to
smartest
vote
people
no
on
against
it. And by the way, we're going to put them on the worst side of the worst 80-20 features of that. And by the way, right when that medicine's gone down, we are going to come in with trade. And it is going to be all of our trade policies. And by the way, right on the heels of that, our environmental dereg and hit their budget. And then foreign aid.
Because the American people voted for this.
And by the way, that's how you make it durable. That's how you draw people in.
So that's my problem. I don't think he's at that level. Look, he's over in the Middle East now. He's got all these conflicts. Even Axios today said there's I talk about the convergence of all the crises, right? The constitutional crisis that you talked about so articulately on the show today, the Third World War kinetic part, which Axios did a great thing about how he's juggling 5 different conflicts and trying to solve them peacefully. And then this massive kind of economic model of the United States, including redoing world trade. At the same time, you start to do these budgets and how we're going to finance it. The bond market's starting to
that's why we have to do the work we do. I mean, that's why, in our roles with audiences and with people who want to be more than just spectators to this process, I do want to get into this Gaza-Israel thing. I mean, what do you think really went down on October 7th?
I think it stinks to high heaven. It is impossible, given CIA intelligence assets, Mossad intelligence assets, Israeli military intelligence, the Saudis, the MI6, the Brits, to know that group, because we covered it live, it just happened to have on a Saturday, to know they did over a 40-mile stretch, air, sea, land attack, coordinated and actually, knew exactly where to go, knew on the kibbutzes what room to go in, the level of detail they had. I was sitting that day going, hey, and the only reinforcements that were coming down were the old guys that fought in the 67, 73, 4 in their own cars with their own weapons. There's something, and that investigation I know Israel is at war, but that investigation should have happened. This is why I think you're seeing a real split between Netanyahu's government and the Trump administration. There's something wrong in this relationship right now. There's a fundamental lack of trust. I think this is because they've continued to push as only the military option. And I believe.
Do you buy that really is why Michael Waltz has been moved to the UN? Because there was that reporting that Trump believed Waltz was so cozy with Netanyahu and Israel that he wasn't.
Well, two things happened. Number one, first off, when Bibi came, and I was of Walt's particular thing, I was pretty vocal. No scalps. We can't get in the business we had in the first team. No, as you know, no scalps whatsoever. We can win every fight we want to win. So you got to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, and we'll figure it out after Labor Day. But I think what happened when Bibi came over for the Trump Gaza, Bibi comes over, and all of a sudden Trump's talking about Gaza and going to make it, and Bibi's like sitting there. You can he was there to push the military option. They're going to have to go to the East Room and have the big press conference later. All Trump's talking about is Gaza. And you could tell, then they come back to the first guys to come back on the tariff day. They came back on that Monday to talk tariffs. Well, the tariffs with Israel is not a huge topic. It was there once again to push the military option. And Trump's not having it. I mean, he kind of cut the guy off, you could see. Now, what we found out from the reporting later is that Waltz, either staff or Waltz himself, was either meeting with or having discussions. We know that the Israelis were quite upset with Pete Hegseth, that the Defense Department hadn't really had alternative bombing operations or support operations. So you're seeing a real breakdown. President Trump is not going to get sucked into another Middle East war. It's just not in Persia, not in an ancient civilization. And the bombing you have to do there is so horrible. He said it yesterday. The buried lead in that magnificent speech, which by the way the mainstream media barely covered. The buried lead is when he said, "We will not. It's not verification. We are not going to let them get a nuclear weapon. It's impossible. And we have all kinds of economic warfare aspects to do this. Diplomatic. We're not going to do it." The Arabs almost stand in ovation. It was the loudest applause line of the speech, and that's not the Knesset. That's the Arabs.
They're all going to have nuclear weapons. I mean,
what Saudi said right there, if they want
in our
one,
lifetime, you're going to have Saudi, Qatar, the UAE,
you think
Kuwait.
If you were running those countries, would you not have nuclear weapons?
With the resources they have, the talent they can acquire, and you
think Pakistan, Dr. Khan may make a visit.
By the way, I'm not entirely sure that there won't be able to be like a sufficient deterrent there, like you've seen in Kashmir. Like what you saw in Kashmir, this last week or so, is that you can have a conventional scuffle that does not
metastasize.
Escalate.
Right.
That's probably a good thing for the world.
I think it's a very good thing, and people should know President Trump did get JD and Marco involved, and I think it had a big influence over that.
How will you know if if at the end of this 4 years, we give ourselves the A, and don't say that it's if he's running in 2028. At the end.
On the policy basis.
Yeah. When you look back and say, this is how this is the report card Steve Bannon is going to get this time.
Here's the one thing I think that we need a Matt Gaetz, we need Matt back now, is that on redoing the commercial operations, kind of what I said at CPAC in 2017. America First, national security, economic nationalism, and deconstruct the administrative state. I think on the economic nationalism, if we can get control of the spending, which we haven't shown, but I think we're going to work through this. There's going to be some intense fights. People are going to be yelling and screaming at each other. Sometimes President Trump's not going to be happy. I think the bond market's going to also discipline us. I think that's going to happen. We're going to pal through. We have to. On the America First national security side, the hemispheric defense, what he's looking at, stopping the kinetic war, I think you're seeing that. The biggest thing I think we get the D on right now is the deconstruction of the administrative state. Elon took a crack at it. It hasn't been codified in the budget right now. But the deep state part of that, we only have 4 years to do this. This combination of the Pentagon, the Justice Department, the CIA, parts of DNI, this kind of the permanent kind of government underneath on the national security side, the Praetorian Guard, the group that kept Biden propped up, as we're now finding out by liberal reporters, the reason that nothing changed between really Bush and Obama, that has to be broken. That is a full-time job, and that because they're not sitting there. They don't care if it's Trump now and AOC next. They're not going to change. We have to break that. The report card.
How do we know if they're broken?
That if you make a decision in the Oval Office, it gets done like that, and you don't have.
Yeah, but how
the
will
apparatus.
regular people know? Like, how will they observing it know if you?
Well, I think first of all, they'll have to hear it from people like us or President Trump to know that hey, we've decided that that we're not going to get us sucked into a war here, and they're not going to drag us into it. And here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'm commanding, and this is going to happen right away. And guess what? No troops are going. People have to know that. Also, the exposing of like the funding of the NGOs, the shutting down of the American people, things of the Justice Department. That's why I think there needs to be mass investigations, grand juries. That part of it, I still think even when we had Ed Martin, he's now turfed out because of Republicans. They whipped it for 6 votes against President Trump.
Isn't it funny that it was like me and Ed Martin that the establishment Republicans had the biggest problems with?
But I think it shows you guys are getting
things done. It's revealing in a way, isn't it?
It's Matt, you're target number one. Matt, I don't say this lightly. I'm a pretty good judge of horse flesh in this area. If you continue on doing what you're doing and you have interest, you're a future president of the United States.
Well, only if you're a future chief of staff.
No, dude. I'm in the war room. I've got enough. I got enough going on right now.
Is that it? Is that it for Steve Bannon? The war room is the final chapter. Would you go back into government? Is the
never
question?
No chance. Zero. The war room is a much. You need a platform. MAGA needs this platform for the vanguard. It's a vanguard of a revolutionary movement. You need this interactivity, information sharing, esprit de corps. You need it. So I'm doing exactly what I'm doing now, and this is what my legacy will be at MAGA, and I'll do it for as long as I can possibly do it. But that's important. But it's to support the young talent I see like that. If we can get to the 2030 census and get the Matt Gaetzes of the world, we're going to be in good shape. But we got a tough bridge thing. And one thing we had to do, we had to take down the deep state.
And if we don't, they'll be in power again, and you and I will both be chatting under different circumstances. But the good news is now we're familiar with them.
Well, I went to Danbury, so I don't have any problem. I know how you have to roll. What your daily schedule's got to be like, so I don't fear that. But we will go to prison if we don't take these guys down. There's no doubt. These people are ruthless.
I believe that. Steve Bannon, the Jefe.
Thank you,
my friend.
Appreciate you.
Make sure to subscribe to the show, turn notifications on, and leave us a rating or review. Let us know who you'd like to see us chatting with next.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.